I am Lisa G. Welcome to GStyleProductions and Entertainment presents Profiles of African American Heroes and Shero. Where do we go from here? We will explore the life of some unrecognized and unsung women and men who have helped to shape our world as we know it. We will hear the heart of their stories as if they were here telling it themselves. So sit back, relax, and listen to the contributions each of these individuals have made as their tales unfold right before your eyes and ears.
Bonjour. I am Homer Adolph Plessy. I was born March 17, 1862, to French-speaking Creoles from Louisiana. I was a free person of color, with parents who were Haitian refugees that fled the revolution. I became an upstanding citizen, and I was a shoemaker, laborer, clerk, and insurance agent. As a young man, I displayed a social awareness that carried me into adulthood. I became a member of a group of Black New Orleanians called the Comité des Citizens, the Citizens Committee. This committee was a civil rights group made up of African Americans, whites, and Creoles. This committee vigorously opposed the Separate Car Act, so we decided to engage direct action against the state's whites-only passenger cars. See, I was white enough to gain access to the train, but Black enough to be arrested for doing so. The plan was for me to purchase a first-class ticket and sit in the whites-only passenger car. So when the conductor came to collect my ticket, I told him 7/8 white, and I refused to sit in the blacks-only car. This got me arrested for defying the law. My case, Plessy versus Ferguson. John Ferguson was the judge who initially presided over my case. A month after I was arrested, was challenged by the Supreme Court because they questioned whether Louisiana's separate car law violated the 13th and 14th Amendments. At the time, the Supreme Court ruled that segregation was constitutional, caused a separate but equal to thrive, and it reinforced Jim Crow. Until the Supreme Court corrected this horrible error by voting in Brown versus the Board of Education that segregation was unacceptable and was outlawed by the Federal Civil Rights Act of 1964. I am proud to announce that on February 10, 2009, Keith Plessy and Phoebe Ferguson, descendants from both sides of my case, announced the formation of the Plessy and Ferguson Foundation for Education Preservation and Outreach, working to create new ways to teach the history of civil rights through film, the arts, and public programs designed to create awareness about my historic case and its effects on the American conscience.
I was only 15 years old, and I just refused to give up my rightful seat on the bus. It was my constitutional right, right? Our history kept me stuck to my seat. I felt the hand of Harriet Tubman pushing down on one shoulder and Sojourner Truth pushing down on the other. Yes, there were several other people who refused to give up their seats that came before Miss Rosa Parks. Like me. My name is Claudette Colvin, born on September 5th, 1939. I am 83 years old and still kicking in New York City. Now, 9 months before Miss Parks, I was arrested. And I was one of 5 plaintiffs in the first federal court case filed by civil rights attorney Fred Gray. On February 1st, 1956, the Browder versus Gale case challenged bus segregation in the city of Montgomery. See, my story was not told because at the time, the NAACP, Black leaders, and other Black organizations felt Rosa Parks made a better image for the movement than a teenager who was pregnant. Yes, I said pregnant. Also, Miss Rosa was the secretary for the NAACP, and people would associate her with the middle class. Rosa herself said, if the white press got a hold of me being pregnant, that they would have had a field day. See, I was also a member of the NAACP Youth Council and formed a close relationship with my mentor, Rosa Parks. It was on March 2nd, 1955, and I was returning home on the school bus. The colored section started 2 seats from the emergency exit. Now, if the bus became crowded and that the all-white section was full and white folks were standing, Black folks were supposed to get up and give up their seats. And I was just sitting there on the bus thinking about a paper I had written that day about the local customs that prohibited Blacks from using the dressing rooms in order to try on clothes in a department store. Well, I just sat there and I just refused to move. So I was forcibly removed and arrested. It wasn't long, but I was bailed out by my minister, who told me I had brought the revolution to Montgomery. And on June 5th, 1956, the court ordered Montgomery's law mandating public segregation unconstitutional. And on December 10th, 1956, the court ordered Montgomery and the state of Alabama to end bus segregation permanently. It was on May 20th in 2018 that Congressman Joe Crowley honored me for my lifetime commitment to public service. I know I am not angry that I didn't get more recognition, just disappointed because I was not the only woman of the civil rights movement to be left out of the history books. Good afternoon. I am Ella Josephine Baker, born on December 13, 1903 in Norfolk, Virginia. I was known as the mother of the civil rights movement.
Well, good afternoon. I am Baird Rusted, born on March 17th, 1912 in Westchester, Pennsylvania. I was an African American leader in social movements for civil rights, socialism, nonviolence, and gay rights.
I was a behind-the-scenes organizer, and my career spanned more than 50 years. I worked alongside of some of the most influential civil rights leaders of the 20th century, such as W.E.B. Du Bois, Thurgood Marshall, and Martin Luther King. I also mentored activists such as you, Bayard, Diane Nash, and Stokely Carmichael.
You know, in my youth, I campaigned against racially discriminatory Jim Crow laws. See, I was raised by my maternal grandparents, who were relatively wealthy local caterers, and their home was large. So, so they often had most of those same activists and leaders as guests.
I gained most of my sense of social injustice at an early age, too. From stories my grandmother, Josephine Elizabeth Bett Ross, told about slavery and leaving the South to escape its oppressive society. My grandmother was beaten and whipped for refusing to marry an enslaved man her owner chose. This helped me understand the injustices Black people still faced.
I worked alongside my friend here as co-director for the Crusade for Citizenship before the Montgomery bus boycott, as well as helping organize a group called In Friendship with Miss Baker. This group provided material and legal assistance to those being evicted from the tenant farms and the households.
Yes, I recall that. Now, see, prior to that, I started my long association with the NAACP working as a secretary. I traveled for the organization in the South, recruiting members, raising money, and organizing local chapters. I was named director and ultimately became president in 1952, the highest ranking woman in the NAACP.
Yes, sir. In 1941, I worked alongside A. Philip Randolph on the March on Washington to press an end to racial discrimination in employment. Later, organized freedom rides, and along with you, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. I also became head of the AFL, the CIO, which promoted the integration of formerly all-white unions and the unionization of African Americans.
I always believed that the strength of an organization grew from the bottom up, not from the top down. And the branches work was the NAACP's lifeblood. I felt the bedrock of any social change organization is not its leaders' eloquence or credentials, but the commitment and hard work of the rank and file membership.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. One of my first realizations I had of my sexuality was when I mentioned to my grandmother that I preferred spending time with males rather than females. You see, I was a gay Black man, and due to criticism over my sexuality, I usually acted as an influential advisor behind the scenes to civil rights leaders. I also was a pioneer in the movement to desegregate bus travel.
You know, tell me what happened and why were you arrested?
You know, that was very personal to me. I got on the bus in Louisville, headed to Nashville, and just sat in the second row. The driver asked me to move to the back. That's the way it was back then according to Jim Crow practices. You see, as I was going by the second seat, a white child reaches out for the ring necktie that I was wearing and pulled it, whereupon his mother said, "Don't touch a nigger." I felt if I go and sit quietly in the back of that bus, now that child that's so innocent of race relations that it was going to play with me will end up saying, "They like it back there." I've never seen anybody protest against it. I felt that I owed it to that child, not only to my own dignity, but I owed it to that child that it should be educated, that Black people do not want to sit in the back. And therefore, I made a decision to get arrested, letting all these white people on this bus know that I do not accept that. It occurred to me later that it was an absolute necessity for me to declare my homosexuality, because if I didn't, I was aiding and abetting the part of the prejudice that was an effort to destroy me.
That is the same reason I continued my efforts on speaking tours and in co-hosting several meetings on the importance of linking civil rights and civil liberties. You didn't see me on television. You didn't see news stories about me. The kind of role I tried to play was to pick up pieces or put together pieces of which I hoped organization might come. My theory is strong people don't need strong leaders.
We were always on the right track. You know, in the 80s, I became a public advocate on behalf of gay causes, speaking at events as an activist and supporter of human rights. Did you know that I was an accomplished tenor? And I recorded a couple of albums on Fellowship Records? Here is one of my favorites. Go tell it on the mountain, over the hills and everywhere. Go tell it on the mountain that Jesus Christ is born.
Amen. Amen.
Amen.
Hello, my name is Dorothy Irene Hyde. I was born in Richmond, Virginia on March 24th, 1912. During my life, I focused on the issues of African American women, including unemployment, illiteracy, and voter awareness. I made it my business to be in the room and at the table. I became an example of a woman in leadership in the civil rights movement and the women's rights movement. I was the first leader in the movement to recognize the inequality for women and African Americans. This had a lot to do with my upbringing. I was raised in a Pennsylvania steel town where my mother was active in the Pennsylvania Federation of Colored Women's Club. And it is where I established my place in the sisterhood. I was educated at New York University, earning an undergraduate degree and a master's in educational psychology. I pursued postgraduate work at Columbia University and the New York School of Social Work. I recall as a young girl, I became an enthusiastic participant in a girl reserve club organized by the Pittsburgh YWCA. I was appalled to learn that my race barred me from swimming in the pool at the Central YWCA. I would later dedicate much of my professional energy to bringing profound change to the YWCA. So in 1937, I joined the staff at the YWCA of New York City, Harlem branch. I met Mary McLeod Bethune and Eleanor Roosevelt at the National Council of Negro Women. the NCNW, being held at the YWCA. On that fall day, the redoubtable Mary McLeod Bethune put hand on me. She drew me into her dazzling orbit of people in power and people in poverty. The freedom gates are half ajar, she said. We must pry them fully open. I have been committed to the calling ever since. I continued with the YWCA, joining its national staff with special responsibility in the field of interracial relations, where my insight into the attitude and feeling of both white and Negro people was heavily counted on. It was during this time the YWCA adopted its interracial chapter, which pledged to fight against injustice on the basis of race, whether in the community, the nation, or the world. I later went to Washington, D.C. to become executive of the Phyllis Wheatley branch of the D.C. YWCA. I was convinced that segregation causes prejudice through estrangement. I facilitated meetings, ran workshops, wrote articles and pamphlets aimed at helping white YWCA members transcend their fears and bring their daily attitudes in line with the association's principles. Now, with the increasing momentum of the civil rights movement, the YWCA's national board was prompted to allocate funds to launch a countrywide action program for integration and desegregation of community YWCAs. I was also part of the training services department, then became the first director of the newly established Office of Racial Justice. In 1958, I became president of the NCNW and remained in that position for over 40 years. While working with both the YWCA and NCNW, I participated in the civil rights movement and was considered a member and only woman of the Big Six, made up of a group of 6 prominent civil rights organizers, such as Martin Luther King Jr., James Farmer, John Lewis, A. Philip Randolph, Roy Wilkins, and Whitney Young. My role in the Big Six was frequently ignored by the press due to sexism. During the civil rights movement, I organized Wednesdays in Mississippi with Polly Spiegel Cowan, which put together Black and white women from the North and South to work against segregation. Through the NCNW, I worked closely with Bayard Rustin on the logistics surrounding the March on Washington for jobs and freedom. On my 90th birthday celebration in 2002, we raised $5 million towards funding the NCNW's mortgage on the Washington, D.C. headquarters named the Dorothy I. Height Building. A musical play, If This Hat Could Talk, showcased my perspective on the civil rights movement and details of many of the behind-the-scenes figures and mentors who shaped my life. I want to be remembered as someone who used herself and anything she could touch to work for justice and freedom. I want to be remembered as one who tried. Yes, yes. I know I've been changed. I know I've been changed. Oh Lord, I know I've been changed. 'Cause the angels in heaven done sign my name. Always so good to start in the spirit. Amen. I am an American community organizer, political strategist, consultant, and jazz singer. I am the co-founder of the voting rights group Black Votes Matter, which has been noted for its work on the 2017 U.S. Senate special election in Alabama, and it influenced during the 2020-2021 Georgia state elections, turning Georgia blue. I am Latasha Brown. I was born in Selma, Alabama in 1970. I started working and founding nonprofit organizations centered around disaster relief, Black voting rights, and funding grassroots community development initiatives. My maternal grandparents raised me, and my grandmother was my soulmate and significant influence in my life. I was 6 years old when I first accompanied my grandmother to the polls, where she dressed in her Sunday best. She emphasized the importance of her ability to vote. Being born in 1910, she was not permitted to do so for most of her life. In 1998, I ran for the Democratic nomination for the Alabama State Board of Education 5th District seat. My opponent, Willie J. Paul, won by fewer than 200 votes. Once the votes were certified, a county sheriff confessed to storing 800 uncounted ballots in a safe. There was nothing I could do. I had no recourse because the ballots were discovered after the election was certified. This practice has been going on for far too long, but my own loss inspired me to create the BVM movement. my works is focused on challenging conservatism in the American South and the effects of voter suppression concerning Black Americans. And over the past few years, I have helped to register over 1 million voters. BVM supports existing grassroots infrastructures in Black communities. The organization works year-round, in and out of election season. Our works include voter registration, advocating for policies that expand voting rights and access, strengthening the Voting Rights Act and reentry restoration of rights. Yes, I am a Black woman, and my eyes are squarely centered on Black liberation.
Good day. My name is Oscar Shero, and I was born on January 2nd, 1884, in Metropolis, Illinois. I became an author, a film director, and prominent producer of more than 44 films. I'm often regarded as the first and the most successful African-American feature filmmaker of both silent and sound film, and a prominent producer of race films during the first half of the 20th century. My writing was about the social oppression I experienced when I was a young boy. In living with my older brother in Chicago, I became unhappy with his way of living the good life. So I decided right then to become my own boss. The first business that I owned was a shoe shine stand set up in front of a wealthy African-American barbershop. I learned business strategies and I saved money. Then I became a Pullman porter, which gave me an informal education and knowledge about the world. This job not only profited me financially, I gained contacts with wealthy white people who helped me with my future undertakings and gave me a better mastery of my business. With my savings, I moved to South Dakota. Once there, I bought land and became a homesteader. This was the inspiration for my first novel and film. As a homesteader, I was able to learn more about human relations and farming. The first of my 7 novels, The Conquest, was the story of a Negro pioneer, which I must say was largely autobiographical, outlining the differences between city life Negroes and the life I led as a far west frontiersman. Here, you have a culture of doers who want to accomplish versus those who do not want to try to succeed, but like to pretend to be successful while living the city lifestyle. Many of my films were open, blunt, and thought-provoking regarding certain issues. My novel, The Homesteader, published in 1918 and dedicated to Booker T. Washington, was my first film project. And through the Michaud Film and Book Company I founded, I was able to sell shares in my company to those wealthy contacts that I made. The Homesteader became my breakout film and helped me to become known throughout the U.S. and internationally as a filmmaker and a writer. I sought to create films that would go against the white portrayals of African Americans that tended to play up inferior stereotypes. It's only by presenting those portions of the race portrayed in my pictures in the light and background of their true state that we can raise our people to even greater heights.
Ava Marie DuVernay is my name. My surname originates from Louisiana Creole ancestry. I grew up near Compton in Linwood, California, where my love for movies developed from watching films with my Aunt Denise. I graduated from UCLA with a double major in English literature and African American studies. My first interest was in journalism, influenced by an internship with CBS News. I soon became disillusioned with journalism and decided to move into public relations. I started a public relations firm, the Duvernay Agency, known as DVAPR, in 1999. We provided marketing and PR services to the entertainment industry, working on campaigns for movies and television shows. It was during a Christmas holiday that I decided to take $6,000 and make my first film, a short called Saturday Night Life, based on my mother's experience as a struggling single parent with her 3 kids during a trip to a local LA discount grocery store. The film was broadcast on Showtime as part of a Black filmmaker showcase. This let me explore making documentaries because they could be done on a smaller budget, and I was able to learn the trade while doing so. My first narrative feature film was inspired by my Aunt Denise Sexton, who had been diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer, and I became her caregiver. The film cost me $50,000 of my own money and was made in 14 days. Roger Ebert called it one of the best films I've seen about coming to terms with the death of a loved one. It wasn't until after this film and 14 years of publicity stuff that I fully left my PR job. My second narrative feature film, Middle of Nowhere, was from a script I had written. The film explored how the families of the incarcerated are also victims of the system. The idea of looking at the victims of incarceration, the mothers, sisters, and daughters, really came out of knowing women who were going through it. I gained success as a director with this film, which won the Dramatic Film Award at the 2012 Sundance Film Festival, making me the first Black woman to win this award. During my summer vacations, we would travel to the childhood home of my father, which wasn't far from Selma, Alabama. Those summers influenced the making of the film Selma, as my father had witnessed the 1965 Selma to Montgomery marches. Selma, the film, made me the first Black woman to be nominated for a Golden Globe for Best Director, as well as the first Black female director to have a film nominated for the Academy Awards for Best Picture. There was some blowback from some historians and media sources who accused me of rewriting history to portray my own agenda. I simply reminded them that the film was not a documentary, and I am not a historian. I'm a storyteller. In 2017, I was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Documentary Featured Film, 13, named for an amendment that abolished slavery. Did you know that my fantasy film, A Wrinkle in Time, based on a novel, had a budget of $250 million, making me the first Black woman to direct a live-action film with that size budget? The following year, I created, co-wrote, and directed a Netflix drama miniseries, When They See Us, based on the Central Park jogger case. This earned me universal critical acclaim and 16 nominations for Emmy Awards. I am still based in LA, and I actively amplify the works of people of color and women of all kinds through my nonprofit film collective, Array Now. Thank you. Again, I am Lisa G, and I hope you have enjoyed profiles of African American heroes and sheroes. We do these videos to bring awareness, recognition, and understanding about the ordinary individual who does something extraordinary that can affect our everyday lives. We look forward to seeing you again in our next video. Thank you, and be blessed.